PR Connections Radio presents. This episode of the PR Connections podcast is brought to you by Classy Communications PR and Advertising. Classy Communications provides public relations and marketing solutions for businesses, professionals, and nonprofit organizations. They can deliver the true meaning of your business with press releases, social media marketing, web development, email marketing, book publishing, and much more. Wherever your potential clients are, they can help you connect with them. Visit classycommunications.net to learn more about their suite of services that can help your business stand out from the rest. Classy Communications is your solution for business success.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Breaking the Silence, Finding the Courage to be Heard, the podcast where we turn quiet fears into confident voices. And I'm your host, Gail Larson. Now, for those of you who may have missed it, in episode 1, we explored why we stay silent. And in the next episode, we challenged the myth of confident speakers. And in episode 3, we learned that our bodies aren't necessarily betraying us when we get afraid of speaking. And in the episode before this one, we talked about finding your voice before finding your words. So today, we are going inward. We're going to explore what happens before we ever speak. So this episode is called The Stories We Tell Ourselves About Speaking. It's all about recognizing those stories and deciding whether, they're still true. So today we have Helene Rose, and she would share her personal and professional experiences, particularly with those language shifts that really help to build courage. So Helene, welcome, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, sure. Thank you, Gail, so much for inviting me onto your podcast. I'm so happy to be here. I am a transformational coach, speaker, and founder of Be Brilliant Network. I love supporting people who are looking to expand their confidence, connect with their authenticity, and I do that through presentations, workshops, and transformational coaching. Be Brilliant Network is also a school. It is a community, and our mission is to awaken brilliance through experiential learning, healing, and conscious connection. So I'm really excited today to talk with you about the stories we tell ourselves. I'm all about diving deep inward to really uncover what it is that we want to share with the world.
I love that, Helene, and all that you've been doing to just really gather this community of speakers together. And so when we think about speaking and those workshops that you've done, you've probably seen a lot of people that are hesitant to speak. And so what do you think about what's driving that hesitation? Is it just nerves, or maybe they feel they lack the ability?
Mm-hmm. Well, fear drives so much of our human behavior, certainly, and it's so important to catch that fear, to notice it, and to make a choice about it. We always are making a choice. Are we going to, let this fear prevent us from stepping into our fullest self-expression? Or are we going to, release the fear? And there's definitely a call for us to release our fear and to step into greater authenticity. So yes, I see this quite a bit, whether it's in Toastmasters or in professional women's groups that I'm in, chamber groups that I'm in, even in my own network. How do we take that wisdom, that knowledge, that awareness of who we are, know that our stories matter, and then decide to let go of the fear and step forward into sharing more authentically?
Definitely. And in your experience, what are the most common stories that people tell themselves? Earlier I'd mentioned it's maybe like they lack the ability. What are some of the most common stories that people convince themselves of about this?
Right. I've never been a good speaker. That's a big one. I don't have anything different or unique or important to share that other people aren't already saying. That's for sure a big one. Or I don't even know how to get started. Where do I get started? What's my format? How do I create the structure of what I want to say and communicate? So these are definitely all, roadblocks.
Yeah, I agree with you with all of those. And for me, when I think about what you just said, um, I'm a member of a couple of Toastmasters clubs. And when they enter into the room, either as a guest or even just regular members, they tell themselves a lot before they ever open up their mouths, during
Mhm.
because there's so many different levels there. So, how can someone really tell the difference between a story they're telling themselves and the actual limitations? And this is most often sometimes referred to as imposter syndrome.
Mhm. Yeah, it takes so much awareness to catch those stories that we tell ourselves. We're so focused inward on like how do I look and um, let me plan out what I'm going to say. And I think that there's yeah, I'm not sure if I'm answering your question 100% completely.
Oh, no,
But
no, no. Yeah.
that imposter syndrome is there for sure because we watch other people be so successful in sharing their stories, but we don't know how long they've been at it. We don't know how long they've been practicing. It's a skill that we could learn, certainly. And if you believe in growth mindset, Carol Dweck's work, we can learn anything at any time and keep practicing and improving. And, there's no limit to really how prolific we can become in sharing our stories or speaking. We're always improving. Even the master speakers. That's one of the things that I've learned from some of my speaking coaches is that a story is never written; it's rewritten. That was my coach Darren LaCroix said that, and I don't know if he said it or one of his coaches, but it's something that I always think about when I'm writing a speech or preparing, a comedy show or writing an article. Yes, I'm writing it for the first time, but it will continue to be, revised. And what we have to share is important. There's something unique about our own experiences that can really help others if we do share them.
Yep, I really like what you said about that. When you're writing a story or when you're telling a story, it's always being rewritten, something that's already inside of you. Um, I can relate to that experience, particularly now, when I just recently joined a bilingual Toastmasters club. And part of that was because I wanted to practice my Spanish, and I have a decent level of Spanish fluency. But when I actually got into that meeting, all of a sudden I'm clammed up. I know what I want to say, and I can't seem to say it because I've told myself I'm not as fluent as some of these other speakers, or I'm worried about what they're going to think of me, or they're going to correct my grammar or something to that effect. And, that really does play into the stories that we tell ourselves and to be able to get out of that and just, I don't know, just rewrite that story. So,
Right. It's like not caring about what people think, like letting that go, the fear of being judged or, like you said, corrected.
yep, that's absolutely right. So, and,
Mhm.
oftentimes the stories that we tell ourselves, as adults might have been stories that maybe our parents or our teachers have repeatedly told us, and we've internalized those maybe as children or young adults. So, what might happen when we like continue to repeat those stories that we hear about ourselves over time? And can you personally relate to this?
Oh, yes. The stories, they're For me, it's a lot about the stories that I heard growing up were all about safety and security. Like, don't take too many risks, be careful what you share and say. And that limits us, from really being authentic, from that authenticity piece. It's something I've had to learn. I was never much of a writer until probably I was like close to age 30 when I met a teacher who really encouraged me to use writing as a way to heal. And I just found that, wow, what a beautiful way to express myself. And I just fell in love with journaling and writing poetry and writing stories. But that writing piece helps us transition into being able to speak. We have to write it first in order to be able to speak and share. So, those were definitely some of the stories that I brought into my adult life. And, I chose to study engineering, actually, which was not a great choice for me. I did not like it at all. My favorite class, actually, in engineering school was public speaking. I enjoyed it.
I tell you.
I liked it. But I didn't really recognize that, wow, this is something I like and something I enjoy and something that I feel good doing. And I listened to those stories of like, well, if you study engineering, you'll make more money. You're a woman, they need women, you'll have job security. But I think what we're learning in life is so much about, really trusting that inner voice, trusting that, I call it the heart whisper. Just what is that inner guidance telling us, and really trusting that inner voice and letting go of what other people think or say or their opinions.
That's absolutely right. When you begin to develop that confidence in yourself and trusting yourself, then your voice comes out, far more authentically. And you mentioned the fact that, you've always enjoyed writing, and it was later in life that, you decided that this is something that you really wanted to do, and journaling in particular. So, when I think back on my experience as I was traveling a lot with my job, I used to journal on the airplane. If I was going out to do a presentation or a workshop or something to that effect, I'd be journaling. And then when I came back, it was a way that, I began to like decompress, and what I also found as I began to write is that when I write and go into speaking, how you write isn't necessarily how you speak. And as you have been writing and now you are doing a lot of workshops and so forth, does that resonate with you?
Oh, definitely. Definitely. It depends on the audience and the purpose of your presentation or your talk. Like, it could be a poetry reading, and then you will write it, read it how you wrote it. But if it's a story, there's definitely a lot you want to add in, like dialogue, voices. There's definitely something to that, Gail. I love that. I love the story of you sharing how journaling helps you decompress. And that's how we get our ideas for stories, really, I think, is through the journaling, through the reflecting on our lives, we can access those stories. And, it's really helpful to have a community or a group that, like Toastmasters or National Speakers Association, various groups, communities that can listen to your stories and give you feedback.
That's absolutely right. And part of the community that you're creating is intrinsically involved in your Be Brilliant network. What inspired you to create this network?
Oh, thanks for asking, Gail. Yeah, it's so near and dear to my heart. Be Brilliant Network is a community of teachers and seekers, and our teachers facilitate monthly workshops for people who want to come and join and dabble in, what's available for healing and for transforming what feels heavy or challenging or difficult. And really, it came about because Well, a couple of things. First of all, like I have a really big interest in healing and transformation. So it's something I've dedicated my life to for 16 years now. When I found myself raising my infant and my toddler alone, their dad had left, and I had to be responsible and raise them. And it was just a really low point for me. And in my life, I was just, I did all the things that everybody told me to do to have this successful life, and I was pretty miserable. Thankfully, I met a teacher who helped me, learn the journaling and learn other energy practices to help me feel empowered. And so I've just been continuing on this healing journey. I call it the path of radiance. When you really acknowledge what are those beliefs, what are those blocks, what are those challenges that are in your way, and removing them so that you can shine your brightest light into the world. And so the combination of, this interest of mine around healing, but then also, Gail, I was rejected from being a school principal more times than I can tell you. I wanted that job so much, and I worked so hard, and I tried to prove myself. I'm good enough. I'm worthy of this. I'm so excited about the school principal job. And it was nope, 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 nope. And all the reason, they gave me the reasons. And I realized, I'm not going to teach algebra anymore. I did not want to teach algebra anymore. And I had to listen to that because we have this one beautiful, precious life, and I don't want to be bored. Like, I'm just not going to do it. So thankfully, I have some mentors who guided me and helped me into realizing, hey, you can create your life. You can do, the things that you're here to do. And I really discovered my purpose and opened up my own school, which is Be Brilliant Network. So,
wow, that's fantastic. And, for our listeners who also think about rejection as something to be sad about, or something, just to hold inside of you as some sort of failure, you've demonstrated that this rejection actually opened you up for like more opportunity that you can ever imagine, and more opportunity to make a real impact, especially with the teachers and other participants that are part of your Be Brilliant network. So I applaud you as far as that, not to just let it linger, but to turn it into something fantastic. Having come from education myself, I wish I had a network, a community like Be Brilliant Network. So, I would be able to find that community, because sometimes, as a teacher, and I'm sure it can be very isolated, isolating, I should say. Because it's you and your students and everything that goes on in that classroom. And unless you have that outlet, it could really put a strain. So, yeah. So that's.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. It definitely feels like a calling, a mission. Just knowing that there's so many people really struggling right now, just going through challenges and, stress. And, we can have a counselor that we meet with or a therapist once a week, but what about all the other days? So it's nice to have a place to go where you can feel that support and receive some practices that are really helpful. So thank you for saying that.
Oh, that it's incredible. And I'm hoping that, for our listeners out there, they have an opportunity to reach out to you as well, to explore more about the Be Brilliant network, your school that you developed, that, is just being so successful right now. So I know just in our earlier conversations that we had, you had talked about something that just struck me about comedy and spirituality. You've experienced try to replace negative with just, the kumbaya positive affirmation. It doesn't necessarily always work. So tell me more about the comedy and spirituality.
Oh, sure. Yeah, thanks for asking. Well, I did become a minister recently through the University of Metaphysics. I have a really strong interest in spirituality and metaphysics. And I also discovered my interest in comedy just kind of by chance, I want to say. There was a little ad up on Facebook that said, "Are you comedy curious?" And I thought, sure, we can always, incorporate some funny things into our talks or workshops. And sure, if it said, "Do you want to be a comedian?" I would have said, no, 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 no. But I went to the class and at Comedy Works here in Denver and just had such a good time. So it's a practice that I'm continuing to develop around the comedy, but I'm really incorporating a lot of metaphysical themes about, that inner awareness piece, the thoughts that we choose to think, our divine self, connecting with our higher wisdom or the inner wisdom, and just kind of being kind of silly and goofy and very adult themed comedy. My show is called The Enlightened Hot Mess.
Oh, goodness. I love that.
Yeah. So it's like I'm taking what was really difficult in my life, the challenges of full-time single parenting, of working in jobs and positions that I didn't love, like just the struggles of this human life and midlife and, the midlife mayhem, the chaos of life, the transitions that we go through, and trying to see the positive in it and just helping people realize that, yeah, you can go through your mess. You can go through it and come out stronger. So it's meant to be an inspirational piece, but also connect, in a funny or humorous way.
I love that perspective. And, we haven't talked about this, but I see that comedy and spirituality targeting a particular niche. And that would be, at least for me and my experience, the middle school and more the high school youth. And the reason why I'm saying this is because at that age, they begin to question a lot, especially in terms of their spirituality. What should they believe in? Are they influenced more by their friends or their peers? And maybe if they are actually going to church or, whatever the community is that addresses spirituality, that it's sometimes more not uplifting and fun, but just, the rules of the game, not like, well, commandments and all of that, but, what you should and should not do, a very serious thing. But with comedy and spirituality, and the topics that you address, maybe there's some topics that, that you could speak in some of these communities that would really draw them in.
I hadn't thought about that, Gail. That's a very good idea. I'd have to become a very clean comic. Yeah, there would be a lot of things that I couldn't say to a middle school population for sure. But, I do believe that that's part of the problem with our society, with what we're missing in society is that spiritual piece, especially in schools. Like kids learn, math, English, science, social studies, a foreign language, art, PE. But that social emotional piece, that spiritual piece, that interconnecting piece, that communication, conflict resolution, all these kind of, communication skills, but also like the spiritual skills, which I kind of see commingling so much because communication with ourself is spiritual. When we're communicating within, to me, that's a spiritual practice because that's your wisdom. And we don't teach that in schools at all. Or, in mainstream society, it's not acceptable to really talk about spirituality, or we walk on eggshells when we're talking about it. When the truth is, like, we are both human and spirit. And people have different beliefs about this, but we're energy. I see spirit as energy. And we are energy beings, and science is even proving that now. But yeah, I think just across the board in all of society, it would be great to be able to really embrace the idea that we are energy, we are spirit. And just, I think we'd have a lot more compassion for each other, empathy for each other. We'd see a lot less violence. And we'd really understand the idea that we're not separate from each other. We're really all connected. and part of something much larger than ourselves.
Exactly. Yeah, I like the idea of that whole spirituality being a certain type of energy, an energy that we have in ourselves that we recognize as being our spirit, our spirituality. And,
Mm,
tying this with our theme today, the stories that we tell ourselves, a lot of times we tell ourselves things, you know, based upon what we see in the mirror,
mm,
tell ourselves stories about what other people say about us rather than to connect to that inner spirituality,
mhm.
that inner energy as
Yeah.
well. So,
Or
um,
what we think we want people, what we think people want to hear from us. That's a big one too, that I've
yeah.
definitely lived by for a lot of my life. What do people want to hear from me? I'll tell them whatever they want to hear. But, it doesn't work so well.
So you're right. You're right. And, sometimes we're so focused on the outcome that we forget about the journey,
Mm.
between, we're just thinking, what's going to happen, you know?
That's such a good point. Yes. Yeah. The stories that we tell ourselves are definitely something to be very aware of, but it's not always easy to hear that or know that. So it takes some practice for sure.
And I know that
Mm.
a lot of what you do has to do with change and transformation. And in speaking with you earlier, you had shared some stories. Well, one, of course, about making the decision to move away from teaching algebra and to move away from engineering, and so you could focus more on your writing and so forth. So, are there some key, I don't know, tips or advice that you could give our listeners relative to dealing with change and
Mm.
evolution?
Hmm.
I know you
Yeah.
teach so much, but to come up with a couple of points that
Yeah.
might.
Yeah. I think part of being human is knowing that we're always wanting something new and different in our lives, and knowing ourselves as creators. We can follow, the rules of the universe that tell us how to create our lives. And we don't know these rules. They're not taught to us. I do teach it in Be Brilliant Network and at HeleneRose.com. But the first thing is really, to decide what you want. That's the first step, is make a decision about what you want in your life. And that comes from our feelings, it comes from our sensations, from our emotions, from our inspired thoughts. Make a decision about what you want in your life. If something's not working, make a decision about it, you know? And then the second part of that is align with that wisdom from within, align with your higher self, align with your energy, your spirituality. I like to call it the heart of all that is. Just align with the energy of the universe and make a commitment. I made a commitment to myself to show up in the world authentically, to do my coaching work, to speak, to run the network. And there are some sacrifices that I have to make, certainly in my life. I've had to make some lifestyle choices. So I kind of like to teach those three steps: decide, align, commit. And it's a practice for sure. It's not like one day it's just turned on. It's a continuous practice that I engage in and teach others how to do as well.
Wow, I like that. Decide, align, commit.
Hmm.
And we have so many of our listeners, I'm sure, and I know that I have friends and family right now who are making key decisions that's going to change, that's going to transform their lives. And to have
Hmm.
something consistently they could fall back on, decide, align, commit, really can help that journey instead of focusing on, oh no, if I do this, what's going to happen? So I love that. And
Right. Right. Because what's going to happen is the fear talking. It's the
yes.
worry piece. So you just make a decision, align, commit, and just see what unfolds. Be open to all the possibilities.
Be open. That is absolutely right, because you just never know what the unknown could bring. So thank you so much, Helene, for being part of this program today. I myself have learned so much, and I plan on using that decide, align, commit as I move forward in this week of the decisions that I have to make. So is there anything else that you'd like to leave us with today?
Thank you for asking. Well, I so appreciate being here and chatting with you. It's such a lovely conversation. And I would leave us with this idea that, we're not meant to settle. We're meant to shine. We're not meant to dim our light or fit in. We're meant to shine, to stand out. And brilliance is our birthright. So we can continue to look inward, to listen inward, to pay attention to ourselves, and really pay attention to those thoughts that we're thinking, the stories that we're telling ourselves, and choose to really live our lives as conscious creators.
That is absolutely profound, Helene. So thank you so much. And to our listeners, this is Breaking the Silence, Finding the Courage to Be Heard. And until next time, listen to the story, then decide what comes next. So with that, I bid you farewell. Bye.
Thanks, Gail.
PR Connections Radio thanks you for watching this podcast. Check out more episodes of this show and our others at prconnectionsradio.com.